The flash of red and blue lights on wet asphalt is a universal sign for trouble. The strobing colors paint a chaotic watercolor of rain-slicked streets and worried faces. For most, it's a warning to steer clear. But for two women being brutally slammed against the hood of a patrol car, it was the opening shot in a war they never asked for, a battle against an enemy hiding in plain sight. Their articulate pleas were met with guttural laughter, their professional credentials tossed aside like a bad joke, worthless in a kingdom of petty tyrants. One of them was FBI Special Agent Alexis Jackson. As she felt the cold, wet metal of the car press against her cheek, she stared into the sneering, liquor-flushed face of a local cop. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of threat assessment and strategy, was already calculating, processing, and searching for an angle, a weakness, or a point of leverage. Her sister, Special Agent Maya Jackson, was being shoved roughly into the back of another cruiser, hands cuffed so tightly behind her back that the pain shot up to her shoulders. The officers were drunk on a cocktail of cheap beer and absolute power, their words slurred but their intent perfectly, chillingly clear. They moved with a swagger that spoke of impunity, a certainty that their actions would have no consequences. "We're federal agents," Alexis yelled, her voice a sharp crack of authority trying to cut through the din of a bar spilling out into the street. "You are making a catastrophic mistake." Her words were meant to be a splash of cold water, a shock to the system that would bring these men back to their senses. The sergeant, a thick-necked man whose uniform seemed a size too small for his ego, just laughed, a harsh grating sound. He tightened his grip on Alexis's arm, relishing the flicker of pain in her eyes. "Not in my town, you're not," he growled, his breath a foul mix of stale booze and malice. As the car door slammed shut on Maya, trapping her in the suffocating darkness of the back seat, her thumb pinned behind her made a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. It was a motion born of years of training, a muscle memory reaction to an overwhelming threat. With a faint click only she could feel, a military-grade body camera, no bigger than a decorative button on her jacket, blinked to life. It began recording, a silent, unblinking witness. It captured the smug, triumphant faces of her captors and the first critical moments of a conspiracy that threatened to engulf an entire town. They thought they were just arresting two women who had bruised their egos. They had just declared war on the wrong ones. And the evidence that would bring their whole corrupt world crashing down was already being gathered, one damning frame at a time. Before the flashing lights and the cold, unforgiving steel of handcuffs, they were just two sisters. Special Agent Alexis Jackson, the older of the two, was a recognized force of nature at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She was a master strategist, a human polygraph who could dismantle a complex criminal organization from the confines of her office with little more than a stack of case files and a secure telephone. Her mind didn't just see facts. It saw patterns, flowcharts, and probabilities, mapping out the future moves of her opponents like a chess grandmaster. She was the anchor, the planner, the steady hand that guided their operations to success. Her colleagues joked that Alexis could predict a suspect's breakfast order 3 days in advance if it was tactically relevant. Her younger sister, Special Agent Maya Jackson, was the corresponding unstoppable force. A brilliant and innovative tech specialist, Maya had graduated at the top of her class at Quantico. She was as comfortable breaking through the firewalls of a hostile foreign server as she was chasing a suspect across a labyrinth of city rooftops. Where Alexis saw strategy, Maya saw the world in flowing data streams, cryptographic keys, and exploitable security flaws. She was the tip of the spear, the one who executed the plan with breathtaking precision. Together, they were one of the Bureau's most decorated and effective partnerships, a perfect fusion of intellect and action. But on that rainy Friday night, they weren't agents. They had intentionally shed that identity, leaving it back in Washington, D.C., hundreds of miles away. They were just Alexis and Maya off the clock in the sleepy, unassuming town of Northwood for a college friend's wedding, a rare weekend of coveted normalcy. The plan was refreshingly simple. Check into the hotel, attend the rehearsal dinner, share a few drinks at a local bar, and celebrate their friend's marriage the next day. For a few precious hours, They got to unburden themselves from the immense weight of their badges and the secrets they carried. They were just two women in a cozy, wood-paneled bar, sharing stories, their laughter mingling with the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses. They reminisced about childhood misadventures, debated their friends' choice of floral arrangements, and felt a shared sense of peace that had become increasingly rare in their lives. It was a pocket of serenity in what seemed like an ordinary town, but they were about to receive a brutal education. In a city like Northwood, ordinary was a carefully constructed illusion, a facade built to hide a festering rot. And they were about to tear it all down. Hours crawled by, turning into a cold, concrete eternity. The taunts from Thompson and his crew were a constant, echoing chorus in the small station. They boasted loudly about the overtime they'd get, the commendations they would surely receive for taking down two dangerous fugitives. They made sure to speak loud enough for the sisters to hear every word. Each boast added another brick to the psychological wall being built around them, designed to crush their spirit. But in this seemingly impenetrable fortress of lies, one stone was loose. Her name was Officer Sophia Patel. She was young, barely a year out of the academy, her eyes not yet hardened by the pervasive cynicism that filled the station like a toxic gas. She had watched the initial arrest with a knot tightening in her stomach, every fiber of her training screaming that everything about it was wrong. She saw the slurred speech, the disproportionate force, the undisguised glee on the arresting officers' faces. Tasked with delivering disgusting cold food trays to the prisoners, she saw her chance. As she approached Maya's cell, with Thompson and Lee watching her with bored amusement, she feigned a stumble, tripping and sending the tray clattering across the floor. Food and water sloshed everywhere. Thompson and Lee roared with laughter at her clumsiness. "Clean it up, rookie," Thompson barked, turning back to his conversation. In the ensuing chaos, as Patel knelt to clean up the mess, her back to the other officers, her hand darted quickly through the bars of Maya's cell. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible touch. But in it, she passed a small, folded piece of paper and a small, dense object. It was an act of quiet, terrifying rebellion. Under the dim, flickering light of her cell, Maya carefully unfolded the note. Inside was a cheap, disposable burner phone and a hastily scribbled message. "They are proud of their work. They never shut up. The walls are thin. This number is your only shot. He is high up. Be careful." The number belonged to Julian Sanchez, a deputy director at the FBI, a man whose name carried immense weight within the Bureau. Hope, sharp and almost painful after hours of despair, shot through Maya. She caught Alexis's eye in the cell across the hall and signaled to her. In hushed, urgent whispers, they pieced it together. Patel was their lifeline. The cops' endless bragging wasn't just arrogance. It was an unwitting stream of incriminating evidence. They began to listen, not as helpless prisoners, but as the agents they were, mentally cataloging every name dropped, every time mentioned, every casual admission of falsifying reports and suborning perjury. Using the burner phone, Maya cloaked herself in the corner of the cell to hide the screen's faint glow and made the call. The voice on the other end was exactly what they needed to hear. Deputy Director Sanchez sounded shocked, then incandescently furious as Maya quickly summarized their situation. "Stay calm, Maya," he commanded, his voice a balm of confidence and authority. "Do not engage with them. Do not say another word. I will handle this. I'm going to make some calls and shut this whole disgusting mess down quietly. You'll be out by morning." A profound wave of relief washed over the sisters. The system worked. The cavalry was coming. The FBI took care of its own. They settled in to wait for the sunrise, believing their ordeal was almost over. They had no idea that the call they had just made hadn't summoned a rescue party. It had sprung the trap. Section 4. The betrayal morning came, painting the small, grimy window of the holding area with pale gray light. But the cavalry didn't. The promised release never materialized. The only person who showed up was Chief Martin, holding 2 fresh cups of steaming coffee, a sickeningly smug look plastered on his face. "Thought you might need this," he said, his voice oozing a false paternal concern that was more menacing than any threat. "Looks like you're going to be our guests for a little while longer." A cold, creeping dread snaked up Alexis's spine, tightening its grip around her heart. "Our director knows we're here," she warned, her voice low and steady, a final attempt to assert some form of control. Martin just chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Oh, I know," he replied, taking a slow, theatrical sip of his own coffee. "I spoke with him myself last night. A very reasonable man, your director Sanchez. Very understanding of the delicate ecosystem we have here in Northwood." Just then, as if on cue, the burner phone in Maya's pocket buzzed. It was Sanchez. "Director?" Maya said, her voice tight with a nod of fear. "What's the status?" "They're still holding us." The voice on the other end was utterly transformed. The warmth and fury from the night before were gone, replaced by a cold, sterile, bureaucratic tone that chilled her to the bone. "Agent Jackson," Sanchez began formally, "you've created a very delicate situation. Chief Martin runs a tight ship, and in your off-duty activities, you've managed to disrupt a long-standing and mutually beneficial relationship the Bureau has in that region." Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. "Sir, they assaulted us. They fabricated charges. This is a criminal enterprise, not a tight ship." "What it is," Sanchez cut in, his voice hardening into a blade of ice, "is a local matter. You went off book, you got into a bar fight, and now there are consequences. The official report from the Northwood PD is, from my perspective, quite compelling. My advice to you? Accept the deal Chief Martin is generously offering. Plead guilty to a lesser charge, disorderly conduct. Serve your probation. In a year, we can quietly expunge your record. If you fight this, you will be fighting it alone. The Bureau will not support you. Do you understand me, Agent?" From the booking desk, a sudden loud cheer went up. Thompson and his cronies were huddled around a speakerphone, listening to every single word, cackling with laughter at the sisters' audible horror. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a public execution, a ritualistic humiliation broadcast for their tormentors' amusement. They were utterly, terrifyingly alone. The institution they had dedicated their lives to, the family they had sworn an oath to, had just traded them away like a low-value asset for a mutually beneficial relationship with a corrupt police chief. The ground had just vanished from beneath their feet, leaving them in a free fall. Despair can be a paralyzing poison, but for the Jackson sisters it was a clarifying, white-hot catalyst. The betrayal by Sanchez burned away any last lingering shred of faith in the system they had sworn to uphold. If they were getting out, they were getting themselves out. And they wouldn't just be clearing their names. They would be taking down everyone who had a hand in this, from the local thugs to the traitors in D.C. Their one sliver of hope was the rookie cop who had shown them a flicker of human decency, Officer Patel. Later that day, during another accidental pass by the cells, Alexis caught her eye and gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. The signal. They had had enough of waiting for a savior. That evening, a staged, vicious fight broke out in another cell block. A loud, chaotic diversion orchestrated by Patel, who had instigated an argument between two known hotheads. As most of the guards rushed to deal with the brawl, only one lazy, complacent cop remained near the holding cells, engrossed in a game on his phone. Using a piece of the metal bed frame she had painstakingly worked loose over several hours, Alexis silently, expertly popped the rusted pin lock on her cell door. She moved with a fluid lethality that the guard never saw coming. Before he could even register the shadow moving toward him, she had him in a vascular neck restraint. He was disarmed and unconscious on the floor without a sound. Keys in hand, Alexis freed Maya. They moved to a supply closet where Patel had smuggled in civilian clothes and a small go-bag with cash and a map. Within minutes, they had slipped out a back door into the rainy night and vanished. They were now fugitives, disavowed by the FBI, actively hunted by the local police, and ghosts in a town that wanted them buried and forgotten. Patel's note had listed 2 other contacts, 2 names that were their only hope of finding allies in this hostile territory. Rachel Kim, journalist, trust her, and Judge Reed, retired. He knows where the bodies are buried. Their first stop was Rachel Kim, a tenacious investigative reporter who had been chasing rumors of systemic corruption in Northwood for years. Every lead she found went cold, every source too terrified to speak on the record. When she met the sisters in a darkened, rain-swept alley behind a closed diner, she saw not just a story, but the key to unlocking everything she'd been fighting for. "Chief Martin has this town in a political and economic chokehold," she explained, her voice a hushed, intense whisper. "He controls the courts through blackmail, the city council through kickbacks. Everyone is either on his payroll or too scared to cross him. You two are the first people with the power to fight back who have seen the monster up close." Their next ally was retired Judge Michael Reed, a man of stern, unshakable integrity. Reed had been forced off the bench years ago for being uncooperative with Martin's agenda. He had spent his retirement in quiet, meticulous rebellion. In the dusty, book-lined basement of his secluded home, he unlocked a heavy, fireproof file cabinet, revealing dozens of black, hard-bound ledgers. "My shadow docket," he called it, his voice heavy with the weight of decades of secrets. For 20 years, every time he was pressured to throw a case, approve a falsified warrant, or ignore police misconduct, he made a secret, detailed record of it. He had documented an entire generation of Victor Martin's methodical corruption, but as they started to build their case, stitching together Judge Reed's history with the sisters' first-hand experience, the system fought back with brutal efficiency. Rachel Kim was ambushed after leaving a meeting, beaten severely, and left for dead in an alley. A savage, unambiguous warning. The next night, the bar where the entire incident began erupted in flames, a professional act of arson that destroyed the building and any potential evidence, including security camera footage, and then came the final, audacious move. With the quiet, implicit approval of Deputy Director Sanchez, the Northwood PD, in conjunction with the FBI's regional office, issued nationwide warrants for the arrest of Alexis and Maya Jackson. The charges were a fantastical fiction: conspiracy, arson of the bar, and the attempted murder of journalist Rachel Kim. They were being expertly framed for the very crimes the syndicate had committed to silence them. In the eyes of the law and the public, they weren't just fugitives anymore. They were the country's most wanted criminals. Huddled in the musty safety of Judge Reed's basement, they watched the national news on a small, grainy television. Their own FBI photos, official, stern, and unrecognizable from the women they were plastered on the screen as a news anchor read the shocking list of fabricated charges. The net, once just local, was now national and closing in fast. Every conventional path to justice was blocked and barricaded. The courts were compromised. The media was being fed a poisonous and convincing lie, and their own agency was actively leading the hunt against them. "They're not just trying to catch us," Alexis said, her voice dangerously quiet, a tone Maya recognized as the prelude to a radical shift in strategy. "They're erasing us. They're rewriting our entire lives into a criminal narrative. If they catch us, we disappear. If they don't, we're hunted for the rest of our lives. There's no middle ground." It was in that moment of absolute desperation, with all other doors slammed shut, that Maya's high-risk, high-tech plan crystallized. She finally revealed the full, classified capability of the tiny camera she'd activated during her arrest. She pulled a hardened laptop from her go-bag and began typing furiously. "It's not just a body cam," she explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's a DARPA prototype, codenamed Echo 3, military-grade encryption. Its own internal power source that's good for 72 hours of continuous recording, and most importantly, a secure burst transmission streaming function. It doesn't use the public internet or cell towers. It slices data into micro packets and bounces them off a constellation of proprietary satellites to a single, secure destination." "When I turned it on in the car," Maya continued, her eyes fixed on the screen, "it started recording and storing everything locally on a shielded solid-state drive. The ride to the station, the threats, Thompson and his crew boasting about their fabricated report. When I got the burner phone from Patel, I used it to send a single coded tone that activated a secondary protocol. For the last 2 days, the camera has been uploading its entire contents, bit by bit, to a ghost server I control, registered through a shell corporation in Estonia. They can't find it and they can't touch it. "So you have everything?" Judge Reed asked, his voice filled with astonishment. "Everything they said in that station," Maya confirmed. "But a recording can be buried in discovery, discredited by high-priced lawyers or sealed by a compromised judge. Sanchez would make sure of it. We need something they can't ignore, something visceral, something live." The plan that emerged was a Hail Mary born from the ashes of their incinerated options. It was audacious, reckless, and their only way out. They would use their enemies' arrogance against them. They would lure the architects of their misery, Thompson, Lee, and Brooks, to a secluded location. They would provoke them, get them on camera, and force them to confess. But they wouldn't just record it for later. Maya would use a portable satellite uplink to broadcast it. Live, unfiltered. They would stream the confession directly to the unclassified terminals of every major national news desk, to the public tip line of the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, and to the personal, secure government terminals of the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI himself. No spin, no cover-up. No delay, just the raw, undeniable truth for the entire world to see all at once. The bait was an anonymous tip, carefully crafted by Alexis and fed through Judge Reed's dwindling network of trusted contacts to one of Chief Martin's known informants. The message was simple and irresistible. 2 fugitive FBI agents, wounded and desperate after the fire, were holed up in the old, abandoned Northwood canning factory on the edge of town. It was the perfect trap, and Thompson, Lee, and Brooks swallowed it whole, their egos closing their eyes to the possibility of a setup. They didn't call for backup. This was no longer a police operation. This was personal. They wanted the glory of bringing in the fugitives themselves. They rolled up to the factory after midnight, their cruiser cutting through the darkness without lights or sirens. The building was a massive, decaying skeleton of rust and broken glass. "Come on out, ladies." Thompson bellowed into the vast, cavernous space, his voice echoing off the derelict machinery. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." They chose the hard way. From the shadowy catwalks above, 2 figures moved with an inhuman silence and speed that defied the officer's expectations. Before Officer Lee could even raise his weapon, Maya dropped from a low-hanging beam above him, a blur of controlled motion that ended with him on the ground in a perfectly applied chokehold. His consciousness fading before he could make a sound. Brooks spun around, his flashlight beam cutting frantically through the dark, trying to pinpoint the source of the attack. He charged at a flicker of movement near a rusted tank only to find empty air. From his blind side, Alexis emerged from the shadows. It wasn't a fight. It was a clinical disassembly. A swift, precise strike to his wrist sent his gun clattering across the concrete floor, and a follow-up palm heel strike to his chin sent him crumpling in a heap. Now, Sergeant Thompson stood alone in the oppressive darkness, his bravado evaporating into pure, primal terror. He was a bully who preyed on the weak, but he was no match for this. This was something else entirely. Alexis and Maya emerged from the shadows, flanking him, their movements calm and deliberate. These weren't the desperate, wounded fugitives he had imagined. They were predators who had lured him into their hunting ground. Thompson fumbled clumsily for his weapon, but Alexis disarmed him in a single fluid move he barely saw. A moment later, he was face down on the grimy floor, his own handcuffs clicking shut behind his back, the sound echoing the one that had started their ordeal. The power dynamic had been wholly and violently reversed. Maya knelt beside him, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop screen. "Remember me, Sergeant?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. She held up the tiny button camera, its lens gleaming in the laptop's light. "This has been on the entire time, but recording is for the archives. Right now we're going live." She hit a final key. A small red light on the camera began to pulse steadily. "Congratulations, Sergeant," Alexis said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You're the star of the show, and everyone is watching. The Department of Justice, the FBI Director, the Attorney General, every major news network in the country. So you have a choice. You can go down for the lies you told, or you can go down for the truth. Start talking." Trapped, humiliated, and staring into the unblinking eye of a camera broadcasting his downfall to the entire world, Sergeant Ryan Thompson broke. His confession began as a self-pitying trickle, then turned into a desperate, gushing flood. He admitted the initial arrest was a complete fabrication, born of ego and spite. He detailed how Chief Martin orchestrated the cover-up, describing the extortion rackets and the system of fear that kept the town in line. He confessed to the plan to frame the sisters for the arson of the bar and the brutal attack on Rachel Kim. And then, in a final, desperate bid for leniency, came the crown jewel. He implicated Deputy Director Julian Sanchez by name, boasting about the deal with the feds that made them all believe they were untouchable. Online, a digital firestorm erupted. News websites crashed. The dam of lies, so carefully constructed, was being obliterated by a tidal wave of truth. The first siren was a distant, lonely wail. Then it multiplied, growing into a deafening chorus that converged on the factory from all directions. But the vehicles that screeched to a halt outside, bathing the derelict building in a sea of flashing lights, weren't from the Northwood Police. They were the imposing black SUVs of the FBI's hostage rescue team, along with a fleet of state police cruisers. Heavily armed tactical teams swarmed the factory, their training and discipline a stark contrast to the thuggishness of the local cops. They found a surreal scene: 2 unconscious officers, a third weeping hysterically on the floor, and 2 women standing resolute amidst the chaos. A senior FBI agent in command, his face a mask of grim determination, holstered his weapon. "Agents Jackson," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and relief. "We saw the whole thing. The director saw it. The Attorney General saw it. Let's get you somewhere safe. It's over." That simple declaration, "It's over," hit Northwood like an earthquake. As federal teams secured the warehouse and took the sisters into protective custody, simultaneous, coordinated raids were being executed all across town. FBI agents, acting with federal authority that superseded local command, stormed the police department and took a stunned Chief Martin into custody from behind his own desk. They raided the homes of officers and city officials implicated in the live confession. In total, over 24 members of the Northwood Police Department and municipal government were arrested before the sun rose. As dawn broke, citizens, drawn by the news spreading like wildfire, emerged from their homes. They gathered cautiously in the town square, their initial shock giving way to a raw, cathartic anger, and then a palpable sense of liberation. For years, they had lived under the thumb of Martin's corrupt regime, their complaints ignored, their fears silenced. Now the silence was broken. Hand-drawn protest signs appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Chants for justice and reform echoed off the walls of the now padlocked and sealed police station. The live stream hadn't just exposed a few corrupt cops. It had given a voice back to an entire community that had lost its own. This was the valid reward, not just their freedom, but the freedom of a whole town. Weeks later, in a sterile, high-security conference room in Washington, D.C., Alexis and Maya sat across a polished mahogany table from a disgraced and defeated Julian Sanchez. Stripped of his title and authority, he tried to justify his actions with the tired, hollow language of pragmatism and compromise. "It was complicated," he said, avoiding their unwavering gaze. "There were larger strategic interests at play. It was for the greater good." Alexis leaned forward, her voice as sharp and cold as cut glass. "The greater good? You sold 2 of your own agents to a criminal syndicate for what amounted to administrative convenience. You co-signed their framing for arson and attempted murder. There was nothing complicated about it, Director. It was corruption. Plain and simple. You chose the side of the criminals over your own people." Maya added the final, crushing blow. "You told us we were alone," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You were wrong." Shortly after the meeting, Julian Sanchez was formally arrested by his own former colleagues and charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice and making false statements to federal investigators. The final pillar of the conspiracy had fallen. In Northwood, the Department of Justice issued a sweeping consent decree. This legal maneuver effectively dismantled the entire police department, forcing it to be rebuilt from the ground up under strict federal oversight. Judge Reed's secret ledgers, once a lonely act of rebellion, became an official roadmap for justice. Leading to the review of hundreds of cases, and the exoneration of dozens of people who had been framed or extorted by Martin's regime over the years. Rachel Kim, recovering from her injuries, won a Pulitzer Prize for her fearless reporting, which she dedicated to the power of truth in the darkest of times. And Officer Sophia Patel, the rookie who risked her career and her life on a point of principle, was hailed as a hero. She became a foundational member of the new, reformed Northwood Police Force, a symbol of the integrity it now aspired to. The story of Northwood became a legend in law enforcement circles, a chilling cautionary tale about the insidiousness of corruption, but also a powerful testament to the resilience of integrity. But the story wasn't over. In a crowded press conference that was broadcast on every major network, the director of the FBI, his face etched with grim resolve, made a stunning announcement. He was forming a new, elite, and autonomous unit, the Law Enforcement Integrity Task Force. Its singular mission? To proactively and aggressively investigate and root out systemic corruption within police departments and justice systems across the country before they could rot from the inside out. This task force requires a new kind of leadership, the director announced to the assembled press. It needs leaders of unimpeachable character who have proven they will stop at nothing to uphold the true meaning of the law, even when facing betrayal from within. That is why I have asked Special Agents Alexis and Maya Jackson to be its first joint commanders. The sisters had returned. They had walked through the fire of betrayal, persecution, and public condemnation. They had emerged not burned, but forged into something more substantial, something new. They hadn't just saved themselves. They had brought back the elixir. They had brought back a way to make sure that what happened to them and to the people of Northwood would not happen again. The two agents who were once hunted by the system were now tasked with fixing it, piece by broken piece. The story of Alexis and Maya Jackson is a powerful reminder that corruption thrives in silence, but withers when exposed to the light of day. It's a testament to what can happen when determined, courageous people refuse to back down, even when all seems lost. If you were captivated by this story of justice and want to see more incredible takedowns of those who abuse their power, be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more content. Let us know in the comments, what part of their incredible fight for justice stood out to you the most? Thanks for watching.